you're teaching other people on the perfect pitch. What is a perfect pitch? Today, I'm joined by the founder of the Podwize Group, Angie Trueblood. Welcome, Angie.
Hey, Corey. It's good to see you again. So there's no such thing, Corey, as a perfect pitch. And I think that's where people go wrong because they think, oh, there's got to be this template, and if I just plug everything in, then I'm good to go, and it is so much more. And I think this is the biggest gap we're filling with the PR agencies is podcast guesting is so much more of a human interaction than a lot of the media relations that they have experience with. And so when you're sending an email to a host or a producer, they just need to feel like there's a human on the other end of that communication. And so that really is the biggest overarching theme is be a human.
Welcome to the Deep Specialization Podcast, the show where we blend focus, strategy, and client intimacy in order to scale and simplify our businesses and our lives. I'm your host, Corey Quinn. Let's jump into the show. Today, I'm joined by the founder of the Podwize Group, Angie Trueblood. Welcome, Angie.
Hey, Corey. It's good to see you again.
It's great to see you. I'm super excited for our conversation today. Would you mind just introducing yourself to the audience who may not already be familiar with you and your background?
Yeah, so I'm the founder of the Podwize Group, which is a podcast guesting agency. So we book our clients to be guests on other people's shows. And we started it back, and I say I back in 2017, really as a freelancer. So I'm one of those accidental agency owners. I had a previous business, and to grow my visibility, I had pitched myself to be a guest on other people's podcasts. And quickly learned, one, that I loved it. And I have a background in sales, so I'm that weird person that loves pitching. But a lot of my colleagues in business started asking how I landed those opportunities. And I realized not everyone loves pitching, and a lot of people need it inside of their business. So that other business, which was in the meal planning space, the mom and family niche, I ended up really turning into a business where we pitch other business owners to be guests on podcasts. And we've evolved over the years. You can ask anything you want, but we've pivoted, we've niched, and we're currently in another evolution to where we're still pitching clients, but we're transitioning into a bit more of a consulting and training firm for other types of agencies who pitch their own clients.
That's awesome. And so, as it relates to the sort of the core business today, the podcast guesting agency, who do you typically work with? Like who do you specialize in working with?
Yeah, so we actually work most directly with founders in the client side of the work. So they're not really solopreneurs. Many of them have their own agencies. There's a couple of solopreneurs who are more course creators, so they've got pretty solid revenue and a pretty solid audience. But they're people who are selling their services, they're consulting to other businesses. So really in the B2B space.
And so when they come to you, are they very focused on a specific audience? Do you help them to identify the podcast, like what they need in order to be able to be qualified to sort of hire your firm?
Yeah. Well, so one, they need to make sure they have a product or service that they have sold a number of times, and they know that if they get more eyes on their business, they can grow their business and grow their sales. So we don't take business owners who are kind of brand new or ones who haven't guested before on podcasts to know that it's a good use of their time and money. So that's really like the baseline qualifier. And then they come in, and a lot of them are more generalists in terms of the types of audiences that they can serve, but it's almost like my business, right? Like we're very specialized in the service that we deliver, but we can be a little more flexible with the type of business owner that we work with. So we get to play around with our clients and help them uncover new niches. Sometimes it's doubling down on ones that they've played around with and they think are a really good fit for them to work with. And we can explore that niche, that vertical with them. So it's nice kind of the transformation that many of them go through with us.
That's powerful.
COVID was a really great example. Like we had several clients in COVID who worked with, one of our clients owned a bookkeeping firm, and they worked with a lot of gyms and local businesses. And during COVID, it didn't make sense for us to get them on those types of shows. So we were able to pivot the messaging and then also pivot the types of business owners that we put them in front of so that they're business didn't take such a significant hit.
That's interesting. So what was the net result of that? Did they end up just being more broad, or did they find another niche to focus in on, or how did that work out? I'm curious.
Yeah, so for the local businesses, some of the messaging was really around the financials of shifting their business model. So talking to gyms that might be interested in offering an online membership and really helping with the finances of that. So we didn't discount some of those altogether, but we changed some of our clients' messaging for those verticals.
Yeah.
And then for the newer ones, they went after course creators and people that were really exploding online at the time, because those were the businesses that needed the help that they were able to support.
So this is a new concept. We were talking about this offline. This is a new concept to me, which is that, as a, let's say, more of a generalist agency, or maybe one that's working with a niche in decline, they're ready to kind of reposition. How does podcasting help you to identify maybe another niche to pursue?
Well, so what we always ask our clients when they come to us, I want to get a rundown of who are their favorite people to work with. And a lot of them have many different types of clients that they've worked with. We've worked with lawyers, we've worked with doctors, we've worked with creative firms. And if there are any that are really easy for them to work with, to where they can deliver stellar results without it being super taxing on themselves or their team, like that's something for them to be aware of. Yep. And then we can go out, research the shows that talk to that niche, that vertical, and get them placed on those shows so that they can connect with audiences, get more discovery calls, get a couple of new clients so that they can work with them and kind of test out, like, is this something we want to go more into? Do we just want to, like, for me, we haven't niched, into a super specific business owner, but I don't really want to. We can't, it would be super competitive for us to have 5 different clients who own bookkeeping agencies, right? Just because of the nature of our work. They would be competing for interviews. Yeah. But I can always keep the plate spinning on financial companies, knowing that they can use guesting to get in front of ideal clients without me niching like to the public, if you want to think of it that way.
Sure. And so, in other words, just to feed this back to you, so in other words, the client who is maybe exploring niches or specialization,
verticals.
Whatever.
Let's call it verticals.
Verticals, exactly. That's why I call it verticals, because niching is too confusing.
I know.
They're exploring different ones, and then you could help them to, first off, guide them to a specific vertical that they probably have some level of experience and data and a track record with. They say, well, maybe I want to develop more of those. And then do you work with them obviously you must work with them on the pitch. So let's say it's attorneys. So they were working with accountants, now they want to go to attorneys. So you help them to craft a pitch that's going to appeal to a podcast that has an audience of attorneys, okay? Right? Is that
but the interesting thing is you really just have to niche the pitch a little bit. I mean, an accountant who works with attorneys doesn't do a lot of things differently when they then work with a doctor, right? A medical practice. Like there's just not, some of these different verticals aren't that different from one another. Yeah. It's just like us. Like me working with a bookkeeping firm, what we do for them is not a lot different than what we work for like a fractional COO. It's just, we just change the messaging. So we work with them in the sense of, hey, is this something you can talk about? Like you've worked with doctors, you know how to talk their language, right? And then they absolutely will tailor their conversation a little bit more towards the audience that they're talking to.
And so I've always been curious. I've been kind of on a podcast tour of my own. Yes. Recently launched a book and now doing a bunch of stuff with programs and whatnot. And I'm always working on my presentation, the stories I tell, and I'm curious, now that you've been doing this for as long as you have, do you have an opinion on what makes a really great podcast guest? Like, what are the things that must be true for them to be a great podcast guest?
It's really just their ability to show up and be human. I mean, I guess it depends. There are some people to where their topic is so fascinating that they don't themselves have to be that interesting. I mean, we've talked about it internally with our team of like, if we have a client whose topic is not super compelling or, sexy, if you want to call it that, but their personality is, then that can still be someone that can kind of sell a topic like financials, right? That's not everyone wants to talk about finances, but it's important for business owners. And so you pull out some stories that help bring that to life. And that's really, in terms of being a podcast guest during the interview, if you are a natural storyteller and can bring up examples of clients that you've worked with or experiences that you have had to where, one, the host is engaged with you and there seems to be some sort of energy between the two of you. And then also the listeners feel like they're a part of that conversation. I mean, to me, that's the perfect guest.
What has to be true to, let's say two clients come in to you and they want to work with you to help to land more podcast guests. One is, let's say, really easy to place and get a lot of opportunity. The other one is much more work for your firm to be able to get them. What's the difference between the two? Like, what makes a guest that's really easy to place versus someone who's less so?
I mean, part of it is the personality, because we do make sure that our pitches help convey that. And part of that comes back to the digital presence, right? So if we have a client who is a ghost on social and the podcast host that we're pitching to can't find examples of who they are as a human, it's really hard to get them booked, but we do it. We just really try to make their topics far more appealing and unique than what someone else in that space might be talking about. And we also brainstorm. Like, we've got a group they own a financial planning firm and they only work with physicians. And it's 2 men in the firm in leadership that we're representing right now. And their topics are around finances, but then there's also topics where they're talking about fatherhood and how, because they're both men and they have a lot of male members and female members, admittedly, but they talk about how sometimes men see their sole role in the family as earner and they'll work themselves to the ground without, having any sort of downtime to enjoy the experiences. Well, that still fits really nicely into a conversation about long-term financial planning. Like, don't use all of your energy right now earning money for the future. Like, take time to enjoy it. So we have to just be a little bit more unique and creative with some of the topics to get them placed.
Very cool. Very cool. And you said you've been sort of in another evolution for your business. Anything you want to share?
I feel like I mean, I feel like I started in 2017. My kids were really little. We had COVID in the middle of this, which, presented its own challenges with the business. Are we good on connection?
Yeah, no, it could look a little fuzzy on your end, but yeah, you're fine.
Okay, cool. Okay. Yeah, so we've evolved a bit over the years. We experienced COVID, which was actually a really big year of growth for us because so many speakers were canceling events. Obviously, they were no longer happening. And so people turned to podcast guesting as a way to grow their business. And then we've done products to where I've trained individuals and I've trained teams on how to pitch themselves. And right now we're really evolving into a bit of a consulting and training firm for other agencies to help them pitch their clients. It's funny, when I started, one of my taglines on social was ridding the world of robotic pitches. And I feel like by us really training other firms to pitch well, that's part of the work that we're doing. And
you're fulfilling your mission.
Yeah, exactly. Who knew? I thought back then it was just so silly. And now I'm like, oh, actually, this is what we're doing. We're impacting far more people this way.
Could you give me an example of a typical agency that now you're training? Like, what type of agency and what type of clients are they pitching?
Yeah. So right now we're working with a couple of different PR firms. Okay. And it's interesting getting into that space. And in your book, you talk about learning the language and really understanding what drives all of them. There's PR. I didn't grow up in the agency space. My background is education, biology. And so all of this, I have a sales background, which is, I think, what helps us be really solid at the work that we do. But I didn't grow up in the PR agency space. And so there's PR agencies, comms agencies, marketing agencies, and sometimes all of them are pitching clients for podcasts as a part of their core offering. So right now we're working with more traditional PR agencies. Some have been pitching their clients for podcast interviews, and it's just not as effective as they think it should be. Others have shifted from getting those interviews outsourced. So they've worked with white label partners, and they want to be more sustainable and keep that in-house. And we're really licensing training to where we come in, they can get our training program for their team, learn how to pitch their clients, and then we consult. Some on the strategy of some of the clients they're working with. And so we've got people who are working with cybersecurity firms as their clients. We've got ones that are working with, celebrity doctors, if you will. So it kind of runs the gamut, which is fun for me to be able to put my brain on that strategy and help them get wins.
So now that you've been doing this for a while, now you're teaching other people on the perfect pitch. What is a perfect pitch?
So there's no such thing, Corey, as a perfect pitch. And I think that's where people go wrong, because they think, oh, there's got to be this template, and if I just plug everything in, then I'm good to go, and it is so much more. And I think this is the biggest gap we're filling with the PR agencies is podcast guesting is so much more of a human interaction than a lot of the media relations that they have experience with. And so when you're sending an email to a host or a producer, they just need to feel like there's a human on the other end of that communication. And so that really is the biggest overarching theme, is be a human when you are sending these emails. Don't start off the first paragraph with a bunch of statistics about the industry. We often see really long bios. And I mean, I get pitched for my podcast, you get them for yours. And the whole email is their credentials and their history without any recognition.
Huge thing on the background. I have to
Yeah.
weed through this to figure out is this the right guess for the audience? Yeah.
Well, right. And so the challenge of that is you're basically throwing up via email to the host all this information and asking them, hey, can you sift through this and maybe come up with a topic that could work for your show?
No, back to the trash.
So it's really be a human, propose a topic.
Yeah.
I mean, how many times have you gotten an email that has 5 different options for topics? And you're like, no, you give me the best one. You check out my show enough to know what is the best topic for my audience. So I feel like if people follow those, keep your bio to a minimum, include what you need to convey your credibility, right? And your ability to talk on this topic. Propose a very specific topic with some details around what it could involve. And don't assume that you are the greatest thing since sliced bread, and actually ask the host, does this sound like a fit? Ask the question rather than, do you want me to send over my scheduling link? Which is what we see in so many of them.
Hey, it's Corey. I hope you're enjoying this episode. And I want to let you know that I have a new best-selling book that has just come out that gives you my proven system to escape founder-led sales. It's called Anyone, Not Everyone, and it's been endorsed by Aaron Ross, April Dunford, Dr. Benjamin Hardy, John Ruhlin, and many others. If you'd like to get the audiobook absolutely for free, there's a link below in the description, or you could simply go to anyonenoteveryone.com and start listening right now. So the best pitch I've ever received, I'd be curious to hear maybe one you've seen or you've been involved in, but best pitch I've ever received to come on my podcast was someone who was passionate about this idea of niching down and having specialization. He purchased my book, gave it a 5-star review on Amazon, took a screenshot of that, and then put that up on the email and said, hey, I loved your book. I'm a big fan, been listening to this, so on and so forth. Would love to, the opportunity to come on the show. It caught my attention because it was reviews. Now being an author, it's interesting. Reviews are like currency. Getting a review is very powerful. So it caught my attention. I was like, oh, someone actually went through the effort of buying the book and reading it and then leaving an amazing review. That was very powerful for me.
Did he give you a topic that he thought would be relevant for him to talk about?
Absolutely, very clear. It was it was very intentional. This was not some quickie kind of request. It was very, very intentional. So.
But that part that you mentioned, though, the screenshot of the review, that is part of that really humanity and connecting with the host. And so there's no templated way to do that. For him, that totally worked. Some people do little videos, which I feel like if you're not careful, those can get pretty, to me, those sometimes there's this one pitch, and I know it's gone around because I've seen this person guest on so many different shows. And I'm like, I know he sent a video to all of these podcast hosts. And I think the videos can be really personal as long as you are communicating to that specific host,
right,
not just
one-to-one.
Yeah. So there's many different ways to do it. I often will have some sort of joke or reference to something that has to do with them or their show, but it doesn't have to be over the top,
Okay. Have you done any like direct mail or anything like off of the email to like get a guest placed, like send them a care package or something crazy?
No, but I thought about it when I was reading your book. I was like, oh, should we be sending cookies?
Yes.
No, I mean, we do kind of, because we want to keep our efforts as scalable, amongst members of the team.
Sure.
But there are times if we've got a big show on our radar that we will watch their socials a little bit more.
Yeah.
We got one of our clients a couple years ago booked on Pat Flynn's podcast.
Sure.
And it was because he had a post on Instagram. Our client had engaged with it. And then that segment of the comments kind of blew up. And so I sent him a message and I was like, hey, I noticed this really resonated with your audience. Would you be up for me, maybe not pitching, but like, would you be up for a conversation with her about this on your show? And then he connected me to the team. So
that's really cool. Have you ever, do you typically get, or is it common to have a client come in wanting to hire you and saying, hey, I want to be on Tim Ferriss's podcast, and then I'd love to be on Joe Rogan, and then could you hook me up, type of thing?
It's
like
so
have
cute.
these really inflated podcasts.
It's adorable, Corey.
Yeah.
I mean, yes,
that, right?
and I will say the beauty of, I have a podcast, and so I think people will listen to that before the pitched podcast, and it's got a ton of kind of how-to and my take on podcast guesting. So I think people listen to that before we get to the discovery call, so they kind of know my approach.
Okay.
And I think for guesting, these niche podcasts are so much more engaged than some of these really big shows. Mm-hmm. And so rather than us beating our heads against the wall, trying to get someone who has no social following relative to Tim Ferriss, you know what I mean? Or not on his radar at all as an expert, let's just go out and get still really solid, engaged audiences, get on those podcasts and sort of build up the bank, where maybe it will make sense at some point to pitch to these giant shows. But no one has like the phone number of, I mean, they probably do of Amy Porterfield as an example, but she's not going to put a topic or a guest on her show that's not a good fit just as a favor. So it still very much has to align with what the host has planned for their content.
And you mentioned it anecdotally, but does a guest who would love to be, let's say, on like an Amy Porterfield, what increases the chances of that happening? Like what has to be true? Besides maybe the topic has to be spot on. Yeah.
One, it's not going to be the first podcast they've ever guested on. So they need to kind of build up to that. And I would recommend that, one, for the pitch, but also I think back to my first podcast interview. I'm really glad it wasn't on Amy Porterfield's podcast. I mean, it was atrocious. And so you want to build up to that confidence-wise and messaging-wise. Like you want to really get the kinks out before you're on a super high visibility show. And then we will work to see, well, do you know anyone that knows Amy? Have you taken any of Amy's programs? Like that in the online space can be one way to get a foot in the door. Yeah. Like, oh, you took a course from Pat Flynn. Does he know you exist? Like, is your name at all familiar to him? Right. So then we start looking for connections and where we might be able either to get introductions or just a little bit of a warmer contact than, pitching to an email address that's podcast@amyporterfield.com.
I wonder, when her PR team is looking at the people of all the requests, what are they looking for?
So I think a lot of big shows are looking for people that also have fairly large followings. And so, the clients that we work with, some of them have really large followings. Like we've worked with people that have shows that have over 1 million downloads, and they've got 35,000 followers on Instagram or, 20,000 on LinkedIn. But that still doesn't compare to the magnitude of some of the big shows that we have tried to get clients placed on. one thing we did do years ago, I had a student in my course who wanted to be a guest on Amy's show, and I helped her write the pitch. So it still came from her. And we've definitely done this with bigger shows to where our client had a little bit of a connection to the person is, okay, well, let me help you write the pitch to make sure you're hitting everything that you need to hit. You send it, and then we can collab on any sort of, response that you get. So I think they're looking for all of it. And there's no magic formula, unfortunately.
It reminds me of before I launched my book, I reached out to a bunch of authors, people I respected, to get see if they'd be open to doing and endorsing my book, reading my book, and then giving me a blurb. And one of the one of the authors that I respect, and I've read his book and taken his materials, is Donald Miller. Mm-hmm. If you know Donald Miller, he talks about StoryBrand. You have the whole script, the story script, I think it's called. In any event, I crafted this beautiful pitch, the story, using his format. I was just really trying to communicate that I actually respect him and that he would be someone amazing to blurb my book. So.
And what happened?
Fortunately, he didn't get back to me. So.
Did you follow up?
If he's listening, Mr. Miller, I would still love
I'm
your
still
blurb.
Waiting.
Yes. I'm still working
we can
on
include it in the second edition.
Yeah, no, I'm still working on it. So hopefully I'll get it.
Yeah. I mean, it's hard. You never know. And that's what we try to set our clients up to know as well, is none of this is a magic, it's not guaranteed.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the challenges some of the firms that we work with too, their clients, some of the ones that we're working with, their clients are much more prominent than some of the businesses that we're working with. And so they have very high expectations. And one of the modules I'm creating for them is client relations and how to set those expectations. Because, we are leading our clients. And so to do that, we have to level set some of their expectations for sure. Yeah.
That's why they're hiring you, the expert, because
they're
going to make assumptions that are not founded.
Right.
So I'm curious, now as a business owner, been doing this for a while, you're going to focus some effort into building relationships with PR agencies and other agencies who are doing this already but are not leveraging your system. How are you going to build that? What is do you have a sort of a plan in mind as it relates to getting in front of these PR agencies to share that you have this amazing product? Yeah.
So networking is top of mind for me. It's what I love. It's what I'm good at. So I have some contacts in the space. One of them has a very large newsletter. So I messaged her the other day and I was like, hey girl, do you take sponsorships? Because I'll pay you. I'm a big advocate of women getting paid for their audience that they have built, and men as well. But so often we see, and I was like, I'll pay you for it, but I would love, in a couple of weeks to include a blurb in the newsletter. And she was like, yeah, absolutely. So I'm going to advertise in newsletters.
Perfect.
Definitely guest on podcasts. This has been really effective. It's the primary way that I've grown my business over the years, both getting in front of potential clients, but also relationships and growing my network. So it hasn't failed me yet. So we're going to do that.
Great.
And then taking a note out of your book, I think really digging in to some of the associations and the meetings, really immersing myself in the space is going to be key, because their language is a little bit different than the language that I, built in my agency. And so just kind of filling that learning gap, because I think there's other things we could potentially help some of these agencies with. Operations, I see they have so many moving pieces because there's so many different types of media, and we're pretty rock solid with ops. So that's my core plan: sponsorships, podcast interviews, and then meetings. And I don't know if it's meetings, associations, really getting into
having a presence, building relationships, networking in those worlds.
Yep.
And then cookies.
Definitely cookies. Yes. Or ice cream, but that's, it's hard to mail.
Middle of summer?
Yeah.
Hopefully it's an overnight package. It's funny, the cookies will melt if you do multiple day shipments. So yeah, I wonder what ice cream will do.
I feel like because of you, there's probably all these folks out there mailing cookies. So now I need to change up
it's gonna get nuts. Next week, I'm as we're recording this, next week I'm going to be in Miami talking to 300 agency owners about using gifts
cookies.
to develop direct relationships. So, and cookies are the default story. So yeah, there's cookie companies everywhere are going to be just, booming for the next, who knows? But
Well, now
I
we
gotta tell
have.
you, this is one cookie company that I'm excited about, just because they've the way that they go to market is in alignment with what I believe, which is that the experience is everything. And in fact, the founder of this cookie company said something that totally resonated with me, which was that the experience of receiving and opening a gift is almost as important, or is more important than the gift itself, right?
Yeah.
And so the name of the company is called Last Crumb.
Okay.
And if you go check them out on their Instagram page, their website, they're doing some changes, but on their Instagram page, you'll see they have amazing photography, and they're dubbed the most expensive cookies.
Oh, nice. They just own it.
That's it. They
It's
own
who
it.
we are.
Exactly.
Love it.
But it's because they put a lot of emphasis and investment of time, money, and resources into the experience of the box, and they have an amazing printed brochure in the box with beautiful photography and great copy, and then the cookies themselves. Oh my goodness, they're heavenly. So,
I mean,
they might
unboxing is a thing, Corey.
What's that?
Unboxing is a thing. Whenever we
Right.
get something delivered, because I've been in programs where I get things sent to me, or clients and referrers, my 14-year-old, she wants to open all of it. It's just such the experience. We do a lot with Sugar Wish, which isn't the same, because you have you ever heard of them?
I think so. Is that the one where you have to go online and they choose their own gifts type of thing?
Yeah, so it's a little different. I feel like for some, to get into an attorney's office, it would be more challenging, because, they have to go through and do the ordering. But it's a really cool, we love it. We send it to some of our referrers. We send it to clients. It's great.
Yeah. I think it was someone wanted to send me a gift, and I got to go on their website. I got to choose between different types of tequila, and that was pretty great.
What? Oh, that's awesome. We need to hang out more, Corey. I need to meet your friends.
I know. Come on, cookies and tequila.
Tequila? Oh. That's great.
Yeah. That's awesome. So I'm excited for you in this focus. Look, I think the more focus you could have in pointing your expertise in a specific area, there's more, I think, generally speaking, opportunity for you to build sort of more of a flywheel and momentum.
Yeah.
So I love the fact that you're doing that, and you're leaning into things like advertising in newsletters and getting involved in associations. There's so much need for the work that you do, and I love to hear that you have now packaged it up, and you're now empowering other people to pitch in intelligent ways, I guess.
Yeah.
So that's really cool.
Yeah. I was going to say, and I do what you want with this, but I read your book at a point where we were at this pivotal point in the agency to where I was deciding, are we going to scale the client side, or are we going to consider the consulting and doing training again? And for me, with our business being as specialized in the service as it is, I could not figure out what vertical we could go down, unless it would be like B2B authors, or because some of the other bigger podcasting agencies, it doesn't seem like they have also, none of them seem to have really chosen a vertical. And reading your book and just recognizing, but if I went in this direction, even though our service would change a little bit, it would be so much easier to talk to a very specific group of people, offer them a specific service, rather than trying to hit all of these different types of businesses and shouting loudly, which is not what I enjoy doing. Yeah. So, I mean, I credit your book for helping push me to make a decision one way or another.
That's awesome.
Because the challenge in the agency side was so challenging.
Yeah, and as you've described it, it makes sense to me, which is that if there's only so many places you could go to, so many podcasts you can go to within a specific niche, that if you had 1,000 financial advisors, you can't get them all on the 15 different podcasts that are available. It's just doesn't make sense in that type of business model. So
yeah, interesting.
Cool. That's exciting. Cool.
Yeah,
well,
I'm
what
excited
else?
for it.
What else should we cover as far as the art and science of podcast guesting?
I mean, some of your listeners who are thinking, okay, maybe we'll test a couple of verticals this way, they likely want to know, okay, well, like how many should we test and how many pitches should we send out to each of
Yes,
the verticals?
Good question.
Yeah. So for listeners that are thinking this is something that we want to test internally for us to figure out our own verticals, I would say when people come to us and they've pitched themselves before, either they've not pitched enough, right? They will have sent out 5 pitches. They didn't get any response and they think this isn't going to work for me. So a couple of metrics to kind of keep in mind. I would pick maybe 3 different verticals that are appealing. If you want to do that, you can also just pick one and kind of go down it, but pitch to at least 20 different shows. And you don't have to do them all in a week. I don't recommend it because if you do all of them in 1 week, it might not be personalized as well as the pitches should be, but pitch to 20 different shows, do the appropriate follow-up. So for us internally, what we do for follow-up is we will pitch a podcast host, then we wait 2 weeks, reply to that original pitch, just kind of get it to the top of their inbox. And then if we still don't hear anything, we'll send the last follow-up 2 weeks later. So we don't need to be obnoxious. Like I get pitches on a Monday and they're following up on a Wednesday. We don't want to do that because we're being human, but you do have to follow up. So if someone has pitched and they haven't done any follow-up, then you can't really say it didn't work because you never closed the loop on it.
Before they hire you, is there any kind of tools that you'd recommend that they use to find the shows within the verticals? Like what's your go-to tool set that you recommend?
So we use a paid account through Podchaser, and I would not recommend that to folks who are just testing podcast guesting. It's just an investment that's unnecessary. Early on, we would use Apple Podcast, and you search for the shows that you're looking for just like you would in Google. So you would go in Apple Podcasts, and if you're interested in a vertical for HVAC, put in how to grow an HVAC business, HVAC business, any of those types of search terms. Just make it the search terms you would use to find shows that you're looking for and see what comes back. And if you find a show that's really solid, Apple will give you similar shows. So it's like they serve up to you on a nice little platter, several other HVAC shows. So it's not like you're in research mode for that long. You can also do, giving away my secrets, you can do a Google search. So for a Google search, you can literally go into Google and search top podcasts for HVAC business owners. And it'll give you some shows, but it'll also give you listicles where people have done the legwork for you. So there's really quick ways to be able to find those shows. And once you found one, you can almost find the rest.
What's the secret for finding, once you find a podcast, what's the secret for finding the contact to reach out to so you can pitch them?
Yeah. So we always go over to the website. That's the easiest place for us to start kind of poking around. A lot of hosts will have a form that they want you to use as a guest. So if that is what they want you to use, then that is what you need to use on the first contact. If you don't find a form, then you kind of get free reign to be able to send them an email. A lot of hosts will have the emails on their website. If they don't, you just need to do a little bit more research. There's Instagram you can go to on mobile and find an email. LinkedIn, you can often connect directly with the host on LinkedIn. So there's ways to find those email addresses. It just takes a little bit more hunting and pecking, if you will.
Do you have an opinion, good or bad, about those podcast hosts who want to charge you to go on their podcast?
I am all for podcasters making money. So that is my first thing. If that is the business model that they're using to monetize their show, I'm all for it. What I have a really hard problem with is not disclosing it to the audience. So we see the back end of a lot of podcasts to where we will send a pitch and then we will get an email response back that is, we charge $300 as a production fee. Or if you want to pay $150, you can get to the front of the wait list and we can get right. And it's never disclosed to the audience. So we have a standard reply that is, 1, please send us like your media kit. Like we want to know your numbers because this is now shifting into advertising and we need to know if there's an ROI. And then we also ask them, how do you disclose this sponsor relationship to your audience? And about 90% don't. And that's when I never recommend it to our clients. What?
They just won't reply to your email. Like, yep.
Yeah, no, they will.
Oh, they will.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because in verticals that are outside of business, I had a conversation with a really big podcast. It was a producer of a very large show, and she seemed flabbergasted that we would want that relationship disclosed to the audience. And we had I even shared a podcast episode that I recorded on it. And I just told her, for us, it's really an ethics and, a truth in advertising so that the end user knows that relationship.
Right.
Yeah. So what's your opinion on it, Corey?
What's that?
What's your opinion on it? Because I'm sure you've seen it.
Well, along my path, so I am doing the podcast tour, and I have come across podcast hosts who are, they're charging. And of course, the next thing I would do is I would try to understand what is the true opportunity here? As you said, what's the ROI? What's the potential for an ROI? And in the very few times, because I'm not a professional in this area, but the few times I've come across this, the opportunity was never really worth the cash that they were asking for, specifically in my case. So I would pass on those situations.
Yeah, we've seen numbers all the way from $35, which I think is bananas. I'm like, is that even worth setting the system up for?
Yeah.
To thousands. So.
Yeah. The one that I have, I did sort of engage with a host or producer to be a guest, and they did do the thing where it's if you want to go to the top of the list, it's $150, and I'm okay to wait. No, all good. Just put me on the list. Let me know when we're up.
Yeah, I'm like, we got project management. We'll put a circle back date on our task.
We'll be here. So
that's awesome.
I passed on that too.
Yeah.
Cool. So I love that. So for agency owners who are in the process of uncovering a vertical market, you mentioned earlier that you would explore verticals you have some experience with, you want to potentially lean into them, do some podcasting in their world, generate a few more clients to help really validate this. And as a result of that, you can say, okay, we're ready to really focus in on this vertical market. You mentioned starting with 3 verticals, 20 shows each, do the follow-up. Don't spend money on getting lists on through these websites. Just do your own research. And as a result of that, you'll be much smarter about these verticals and have a much more data to make a really high quality decision when specializing in a vertical.
Yeah. Well, and there's other free apps out there that can help. So Listen Notes is a great one that's free, really accessible, great search features. Chartable, I think they have a free version to where you can get a sense of if the show has ever placed on the charts, which is kind of nice to know the size of it. So I feel like there's plenty for folks who are pitching themselves, not, a whole gaggle of clients, to where you don't really need to invest. Podmatch, we've used that before as an agency and an individual, and I adore Alex and what he is doing. I think there have been some really great collaborations that have come out of there. And for me, it's hit or miss. And I feel like it's reasonably priced. And so to me, it's worth it just to at least explore it for a couple of months to see if you get matched with a show that's a good fit.
Yeah. Candidly, I'm on there.
Yeah.
My assistant is going in and she's researching different opportunities for me. Yeah.
Oh, I love that. Nice. Yeah.
Awesome. Cool. What else for our agency audience? What else would be helpful for them, do you think?
So that's the number. Well, so one question a lot of people always ask is the pitch better coming from me or an assistant? How to project manage that? Because agency owners for sure do not have time as an available resource.
Yep.
And the idea, I think of even myself pulling a pitch list for me, it doesn't happen. I have to get a teammate to do it. Yeah. So the idea and the question might be is how do we implement this if it's something that we want to do with our team? Yeah. And it's really understanding the skill set. And likely, if you own an agency, you have several people on the team with different skill sets. For agency owners that are thinking, how do I implement this with the number of people that I have on my team? I would definitely delegate to different folks. The research component, so finding the shows to pitch. If you have someone that is great at doing research, whether it is kind of collecting competitive data or on behalf of your clients, really looking into like the landscape and strategy for clients, that's probably a great person for research. You're going to want a strategy brain in there who also is solid at messaging. So that's where we see our teammates that do the pitching are really great at communicating through email. I mean, you want someone who has a little bit of business acumen to be able to do that. And then I highly recommend an admin person for doing the scheduling and the interaction with the hosts on the back end. Because that's before we had an admin on our team. I felt like I was always dropping the ball with scheduling and the things that I'm not good at. And having someone have ownership of that is great. So I would say they probably have a couple of folks on their team that they can segment the parts of pitching and guesting out to.
What type of time commitment is this look like overall?
Yeah. I mean, you know, I said 20 shows to pitch. I don't recommend, 2 a week for an individual is probably fine. If you really want to go big, I think an owner could maybe get 5 pitches out in a week if they want to do it in more of like a sprint formation to where, all right, we're going to pitch for 8 weeks and then call it, do the follow-up, do the interviews, but we don't need to do this all year. To get a pitch out, I would say between research, prep, sending, and follow-up, probably a total of 1.5 hours. So if you could allocate just a couple hours a week and just keep that plate spinning, that's the key to it. It's just not, we had a student one time and she said, I have a pitch list of 100 shows. And I'm like, oh my God, why did you not start pitching when you had 10? Because you want to get that, just some of that, not endorphins, but just the positive feedback of, this is working.
Yeah.
Rather
absolutely.
than like
Easy
going
win,
down the
build
research hole.
momentum. When it comes to the call to action, so you're coaching your clients, you're getting them on amazing podcasts. They obviously are wanting, let's say in the term of an agency owner who's testing out some verticals. How does being a guest on a podcast translate into clients? Like, what is there a pitch?
Yeah.
Is there an offer? Like, what do you? How do you coach them?
So the pitch isn't a hard pitch because you want to be respectful that you're creating content and helping the host, create content for their own audience. But at the end, first you want to plant seeds throughout the interview, drip the idea of the types of clients that you've worked with in the past through your stories, which I've done here. Your listeners can probably think, okay, she works with agency owners. I know a couple that she's worked with. At the end, and that's the challenge. I think so many people place all this emphasis on like that last 2-minute blurb of what do I tell the listener to do? And really it should be set up along the way to where at the end they're expecting you to say, hey, if you want to know how to work with me, go to this page. The big call to action, whether it's schedule a discovery call or sign up for my opt-in, it really depends on your business model because folks like the bookkeeping firm, no one that wants to outsource their bookkeeping wants to sign up for some financial spreadsheet that they're never going to do. So, right?
Yep.
So we tested that in the beginning. We worked with that client probably for 3 years. And at one point she had a book and then at another point she had a financial dashboard. And I said, just give them the link to the discovery call. Like if you want help, sign up and let's talk. So the most direct call to action, like their next logical path of working with you, share that with them. And then we coach and help our clients just to create a landing page that has several different options because listeners all have different personalities. And some may hear me and think, oh, I want to talk to her. Like I really want to book a discovery call with her. And others might be like, oh, this is interesting, but it's not relevant right now to me. But maybe I'll go connect with her on LinkedIn. So we have a landing page that folks can go to and they can see. It's like choose your own adventure. We're all adults here. I don't love the idea of siloing them into like, do this one thing or we will never. So.
That's beautiful. Well, with all that in mind, where could people reach out to find out more about you and your service?
Yeah. So my landing page is the Podwize Group /hi there. And there's access to the podcast, scheduling a discovery call, more info on the work that we do. And then I'm really active over on LinkedIn and Angie Trueblood. So,
okay.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Well, this has been fantastic. I always love bringing seasoned experts in a specific area that directly relates to agency founders. And this has been a real great conversation. So much good data. I've been taking so many notes. Thank you, Angie. This has been great.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Corey. Appreciate it.
That's it for today. I'm Corey Quinn, and I hope you join me again next time on the Deep Specialization Podcast. If you received value from this show, please go to Apple Podcasts and leave us a review. Thanks, and we'll see you soon.